Welcome to a meeting of your Planning Commission, the official local planning agency for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. The Planning Commission provides innovative leadership and long-range vision that contributes to the creation of a thriving, prosperous community that offers opportunity, fairness, and choice in how we live, move, learn, work, and play. For more information about the Planning Commission, please call 813-272-5940. Follow us on social media or visit our website at planhillsborough.org.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 8th, 2019 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. Please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. If you wish to address the commission on agenda items, we ask that you please sign the appropriate public comment sign-in sheet at the back of the room. When addressing the commission, please state your name, address, and speak directly into the microphone. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the commission when recognized by the chairman. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal. Planning commissioners will then ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I'll ask Commissioner Dowdy to lead us in the prayer and pledge of allegiance. All rise, please.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with praise for your power and guidance, and we thank you for the day and thank you for the many blessings in our lives, for our country, and the opportunity to live in freedom. We ask your blessings on our leaders and that you give each one of us here today the wisdom to make the right choices so our decisions will be in the best interests of the people of Hillsborough County. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Dowdy. Roll call, please.
Good afternoon. Powell. Dix. Green. Present. Joseph. Kress. Here. Marino. Here. Willman. Here. Thrower.
Here.
Wilds. Dickerson. Rodriguez.
Here.
And Dowdy.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the approval of the minutes for the following meetings: the regular meetings for February 11th and March 11th, and the public hearing on City of Plant City amendments for March 11th, 2019, and the public hearing on City of Temple Terrace amendments for March 11th, 2019. We have any questions or discussion concerning those minutes? Commissioner Willman?
I just wanted to note an item at the bottom of page 3 on the February 11th meeting minutes. I reviewed the transcripts and just wanted to make a modification to my statement where it says Commissioner Willman referenced efforts to streamline the plan presentations, and modify that to more accurately reflect my comments, which would then read Commissioner Willman referenced potential improvements to text amendment applications. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments concerning the minutes? Would someone like to make a motion of the minutes as restated or as corrected?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended by Commissioner Willman.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Commissioner Dowdy, a second by Commissioner Green. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor of the minutes as stated, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 3 on our amendment, on our agenda. It's update to Planning Commission fees. Oh, is there any public comment? Any public comment on any items that aren't on our agenda today? Okay, no public comment. We'll move on to number 3. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Stephen Griffin, Planning Commission staff. This afternoon, you will receive a presentation on the fee study that was conducted by Mr. Bruce Cowens of First Choice Consultant. Mr. Cowens is a consultant who worked on this study. He's done dozens of these studies across the state of Florida. He's done hundreds across the United States. In fact, Mr. Cowens was a speaker at the Government Finance Officers Association annual conference where he spoke on how to do a fee study. And he's authored several publications in trade magazines and trade publications. This afternoon, he will be presenting that to you. At the end of his presentation, at the end of your discussion, we ask that you take action on the fee studies. And without further ado, I'll have Mr. Cowens come on and speak to you with regard to the fee study.
Thank you. This is Bruce Cowens. Let's begin. The first question is, why even do this? And presumably, fee prices are on the books because of the intent that the person requesting service pay for it. But, of course, the price on the books does not always match what it takes to deliver the service. And to the extent that prices don't recover costs, you are either using an appropriation or a fund balance to make up the difference. In Florida, of course, tax limitations have made it harder to rely on taxes, and that has made fees a little more important. The county's Development Services Department recently did a fee study, and there was discussion after it began that this would be a good time to look at the fees of the Planning Commission as well, and that's why this is before you today. I occasionally hear somebody say, I can't support this because it's just another tax. There are people, of course, that think that any charge of any kind is a tax. Somebody that believes that strongly is entitled to that belief. Generally, in the press, a tax has nothing to do with how much service you get. But if you pay a fee, you become entitled to receive the service for which you paid. You're already doing a financial analysis, of course, by developing a budget and reviewing and approving expenditure levels. What we're doing in a fee study takes analysis down from the level of the organization as a whole to the costs of the individual activities for which you charge. Labor is, of course, the largest single cost that you incur, so we spend a great deal of time analyzing how you staff each activity. But we look at the other expenditures of the Planning Commission and how those can be associated with each of the activities. We also looked at departments reporting to the county administrator because they are routed on some of these reviews, and the cost of those organizations is part of the cost that is incurred when somebody applies. This goes two ways. Planning Commission spends a substantial amount of effort to support applications sent by the Development Services Department, and we've measured those as well. So we are looking at current year expenditures. Transaction counts are from last year because this year's not done yet, but what we've done in all cases is use the latest available data. What you see here is the departments reporting to the county administrator are, you see the number 38,823. It's a small portion of the total cost. Obviously, the Planning Commission has the lion's share of the cost for Planning Commission fees. But the $228,000 figure, $228,019, represents a very substantial effort of Planning Commission staff in support of Development Services Department fees. We have exported that cost over to the Development Services model, and we are recommending to the Board of County Commissioners that they consider that when they set fees so that the Planning Commission may be reimbursed for what it does on behalf of those applications. it's fair to say that current fee prices are of such a vintage that they don't do a very good job of recovering the cost of what you do. I don't think that's intentional. These fees have been in place for a long, long time, and with the inflation taking its toll, very little of what somebody's paying a fee for is actually funded by the fee. It's the rest of your budget that picks up that cost. One of the things we found was not only are your fees not doing a particularly good job of recovering costs, but also that when we look around what other units of government are charging for comparable services, that your prices seem to be a lot lower than everybody else is charging. And I'm just going to be quiet for a minute to let you study this. You see your cost in the Hillsborough County Planning Commission, and those red numbers in the column next to it are how much your prices are below what the peer group is charging. We reviewed more services than this. The difficulty is not everybody titles their services the same way, so we weren't able to get a peer match on all of the things for which you charge. But for the ones that we did, the trend was very clear. There are times when applicants do things for which there is no current fee, but staff have pointed out that they believe that these may be appropriate for your consideration as new fees. So if there is a delay at the applicant request, we're suggesting that that might be something you should consider for a new fee. If the delay is not requested by the applicant, then it would not be fair or reasonable to charge the applicant for that. Here you see the findings at the level of the individual activities. The red numbers, they tell the story. That's how much per application you're coming up short at current prices. Off to the far right are our firm's recommendations. And so for the first one, for example, for a map amendment, you're charging $1,000. It costs you a little over $8,600 to do that. The peer average price is $4,182. We are not recommending that you charge the full cost because, in our opinion, that is a substantial adjustment over current price to the point where it would just be, in our opinion, difficult for people to accept. But we are recommending a substantial increase in the price of that item. And so on down the list, there are times where we just don't think you should try to recover full cost, but we would urge you to consider that you establish fee prices for the sake of being reimbursed. And if the facts show that that price isn't sufficient to reimburse you, if you don't want to go all the way up to actual cost, that's fine, and you're entitled to make that decision, but we would urge you to increase prices of fees. That is the end of the slideshow, so I will now turn it back to you for questions. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have.
Okay, Bruce, before we see if any of the commissioners have any questions, I'm going to see if there's any public comment on this item. Please come forward, state your name and address if you'd like to speak during public comment on this item. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Motzinger, and I represent the Tampa Bay Builders Association. I'm very familiar with fee studies. We are participants in a lot of them all over the region. We always support fair fees for a fair level of service. So one thing that, and this is the first time I'm seeing this information, but one thing that I would urge you to consider is if you are going to make an increase in these fees, there should be a level of service that the customer should expect in reciprocity for that fee. So I'd like for you to consider exploring that relationship before moving forward with any increase, because if you don't have a relationship there, and if you don't have a customer base that supports a level of service, then you're just starting off a new process and a new fee schedule with a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty. So thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ron Weaver, 401 East Jackson Street with the Stearns Weaver Law Firm. We are also members of the Builders Association and a number of other organizations around the town. And we have 3 questions about whether or not such a dramatic increase is called for at this time, and would encourage you, as the Builders Association has, to just think on this for at least a month or two on 2 or 3 ramifications which you may or may not have gauged yet. And one of them is the fact that affordable housing has become a crucial issue. And tomorrow morning, I hope you're all coming at 8:30 a.m. to a community-wide forum sponsored by the University Area Community Development Association at the Victor Christ Center around USF on just the subject from 8:30 to noon of affordable housing. It has become the first or second biggest issue along with transportation in the mayoral race, and is such an issue that I'm wondering if the affordable housing consequences of this particular change have been gauged, and from 2 perspectives to begin with. The first is that if a property is currently Res 1 and it needs to go to Res 6, like one of your applications in about 10 or 20 minutes, and there are hundreds of those we've seen over the years together, and that would achieve by that Res 1 to Res 6 or whatever the categories are that are changed, are also enabling affordable housing by their change, and to add a fee, a dramatically larger fee to that pursuit of more affordable housing, and probably half a dozen other ramifications. I've only illustrated with 2, and therefore I would suggest that you take a month or 2, not just as suggested by the builders for those great reasons of level of service for what you would get for any increase, but that you would please take a look at the social policies like affordable housing that you might be implicating, and whether or not you are implicating them, and if you are implicating them, whether or not there is some way that you can adjust the dramatic increases to accommodate affordable housing in this community in light of the urgency of it. And I would also respectfully request that you have a few more stakeholders, and grateful that the Builders Association is here to also weigh in on what other ramifications there might be to such a dramatic increase for small businesses, for example. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. No additional public comment. Would any questions from commissioners on this item? Commissioner Marino?
Thank you. I guess this question, I don't know if it's for staff or for the consultant. What does state law say about how fast the fees can go up? Because I saw there's a comment that this can't be used to generate revenue, but is there a percentage in which the fees are allowed to increase if a county decides to increase the fees?
You mean on a gradual
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Florida statutes would bar you from setting prices in excess of cost. You're not supposed to make a profit. These prices, I believe, were authorized 30 years ago. So it's not really surprising that they don't recover their costs. I believe you are entitled to resolve to increase prices and make them effective. To the how fast could you do it? At least you need to change your forms in your website before you do that. Does that distort demand? I guess the question there is, what is the cost of the fee increase as a percent of somebody's project? In some cases, we're talking about increases that are a few hundred or even a few $1,000s, considering the cost of the land and the construction and the project. Whatever the project is, what is the cost of the developer of doing the project, at land and structure included, and what does adding a few $1,000s of expense to the overall project do to the return on investment? Because if the fee is a material percentage of the total cost, it could distort the return on investment. And if it's not, it shouldn't.
So then, as a follow-up, there's no guidelines as to say if a community decides to increase these fees, they can only say increase 3% annually, or because some of the for example, the comp plan text amendment private, the proposed price seems more in line with the cost, but you're going from 1,000 to 11,000. So there's nothing in state law that would prevent that type of increase.
Not that I know of.
Okay, and then so my follow up to that is, we are taking action today, or we were being asked to take action today to advance this to the county commission, and the county commission will make the final determination of whether or not this is appropriate, correct?
Yes, each local government sets their fees for the services we provide on their behalf. So this would just be for the unincorporated county group of applications. It was the BOCC who requested the study. The timing is such that because Mr. Merrill will be bringing this to the county commission on May 1st, and he did not know whether or not they would want to act on it at that time, and this is the only meeting you all have between now and May 1st. So that is why the timing is such that we haven't had additional stakeholder meetings or given you multiple meetings to digest it. It's the study ended in March, and here we are.
Okay, because that would be my last question is, we've heard some comments here. Those of us who even have a basic understanding of this know the potential of increasing fees versus what the current situation is and concerns with that. So there would be an opportunity for, in that second stage before it gets to county commission, to have those stakeholder meetings, but that's the county's prerogative. If the county decides to go that direction, they can have those discussions. It's not really our place to have that discussion.
Certainly, I've had conversations with Adam Gormley, the Development Services Director, about trying to have a meeting with the industry before that May 1st meeting. He was looking into whether or not that could be scheduled, but it was my concern that I didn't want this presented to the board and them to take action on it without you all having made a recommendation. Now, you can make a recommendation of keeping things the way that they are, all the way up to what the consultant has recommended. Or you could say the consultant hasn't recommended enough in some of the cases where he hasn't recommended full cost recovery. So that is your discretion as part of your recommendation to the board.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, or we technically could recommend further investigation as to the outcomes of some of these fee increases before taking a position.
You could, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question which was somewhat related to Mike's question, but could these fees be gradually increased?
Absolutely.
You may do that.
Yeah, as part of your recommendation, you could recommend that they be phased in over a certain period of time, or that they increase by a certain increment over a certain period of time. Absolutely.
Okay. And can we actually reduce the costs, or for that matter even exempt these costs for certain types of affordable housing?
We see that.
Well, I'm glad Bruce is chiming in on that. So that's perfect, because yes, that would be my answer.
There are projects that can be given an exemption, in my opinion. I'm not an attorney, so obviously you seek legal advice on that. But if you're asking as a practitioner, do I see it? Yes, people do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd want to develop some criteria related to that. One other potential that I've seen, for example, in the city of Temple Terrace, sometimes if they've got an applicant who they've done it for a couple of annexations where it's advantageous, that there's a public benefit to having that property change its plan category. They have initiated the plan amendment on the applicant's behalf, as opposed to, because these are fees charged
Right.
to private
yeah,
applicants. We're not
as opposed
charging
to
each
city.
of the local governments those fees. So that's another thing that is always at each local government's disposal, is if they see a public benefit to a specific plan amendment, they can move it forward themselves.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Dowdy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got to start with the subject of increased fees came up 6 years ago, somewhere along that line, maybe longer ago. And we launched on a process of actually tracking hours in order to try, because we couldn't come up with cost back then. And now I'm thinking we're looking towards that we have a much better handle on costs. So I had a couple questions that go along with Commissioner Green as far as, can we discount them in certain situations? Can we do that? And we haven't determined, and I don't know that we're being asked to determine that at this point. I am intrigued a little bit by Ms. Motzinger's discussion of a level of service and what is expected, what the applicants should expect. I've been involved in a number of discussions like this with different agencies that process applications, not just planning commission type things, and I tend to agree with her somewhat on the fact that the applicant should expect to receive something in particular for that. I'm a little curious as to what the Builders Association or others might actually be looking for. I mean, we do have timelines to respond to things unless they're looking to tighten those things up a little bit, to say, you'll make a decision by a certain period of time. I'm not sure. It's not like you can give a guarantee that it's going to be a blessing on whatever it is. So I almost, do you have, I want to ask if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
I'd like to ask Ms. Motzinger if she could maybe expound a little bit on what she's might expect, please.
Yep. Please come forward.
Sure, absolutely. So without knowing the ins and outs, I'll just say this anecdotally, that level of service is different jurisdiction to jurisdiction based on level of activity and the resources and things like that. So, for example, if you've got the different jurisdictions, that comparison, what I don't know at this point, but what would be helpful is to have an understanding of what those jurisdictions, for that cost, what is their timeline? What can the customer expect? So I'm just trying to avoid the situation of, gee, these fees are going to be increased by $3,000 or $4,000, and I'm still going to get the same level of service that I've been getting, whereas in ABC County, they're this level, but it's going much faster than that. Also, the other component for you is, as you're budgeting with this new fee schedule, please take into consideration that time is money, and my members want certainty in the process above everything else. So I'm hoping that if these fees do move forward, that you look at the level of service as it stands today and compare it to other jurisdictions for the same amount of money. And also, too, looking ahead, what is that, how do you maintain that level of service? Are you going to need additional resources, investments in technology, investments in additional space or staff?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think I got a better feel for what she's asking, and I'll ask Bruce if during your study you were looking at the cost but did you also look at, and can you speak briefly to that level of service? Did you compare timelines and that sort of thing when you did this comparison?
We didn't do that, but we did dive into that question some. I didn't find any material inefficiency, but I think Jennifer is right that usually what we hear in this case is that nobody ever wants fees to go up, and you can't blame them for that. But timeliness is is vital, because that's a cost too when there's a delay. I don't think it'd be very difficult to call around and see how long it takes. The problem is when you say how long does it take to get a approval of an application.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, did the applicant submit all the necessary information? Is it
Right.
explained? Did staff understand it correctly? There are a number of variables there that are hard to get your mind around. But I don't think it would be that difficult to make some calls and say, you know, ballpark. If you get an application, when's it reported to your commission for action?
Right. Okay. That's one.
And I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and so I mean, I kind of like the idea that if we're trying to match up cost, we ought to be matching up result as well, and then I have I guess a question. This would be for Melissa. Are the costs? We're using today's salaries, today's people, keeping in mind that we're fixing to have a big turnover, right, in senior level people. Is this cost likely to change? Hours are going to go up, but costs are going to go down, et cetera. So has there been any thought along those lines? And so I'll let you chat briefly on that.
Yes, we did take a look at that. And so we utilized, for example, for a map amendment, we utilized the time of a senior planner level as opposed to some of the map amendments for the unincorporated county are assigned to Krista, who's an executive planner. So we used, to the extent that there was any difference between what level of person could, if the lowest level of staff person who could do the work is where we tried to assign the hours. So for example, Sean presents regularly on port permits. We assigned his time at a senior planner rate as opposed to a team leader rate because we didn't think that was fair to assign it at a higher rate than what, just because Sean's kept that project as he's progressed in the agency, a senior planner could certainly assume those levels of duties. So we tried to balance that issue.
Okay. May I continue? Thank you. Okay, so I don't believe that, and I'm sure they will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the builders associations or most applicants or whatever, I mean, yeah, nobody wants to pay any more money, but I don't think anybody would really have a problem with paying a reasonable fee for a reasonable result as far as that goes. The fees have been the same for 30 years, and I mean, I will be honest, I believe they were probably low 8-9 years ago when we had this discussion, but we couldn't justify what it was. I like the recommendation that we continue to track and revisit this thing at certain times and adjust these fees accordingly. I'm not sure that we should index them to any cost of living or anything like that, but just revisit them because they could go up, but they could go down, right? So I'm not averse to approving fee increases just along that line, and I think some fee increase likely should happen. So I haven't yet necessarily really, I mean, Commissioner Marino may have kind of come on it really that it's not our necessarily place to let the county commission decide whether they want to do some further studies or whatever like that, but I'm not sure that I've heard a proposal or a hybrid proposal that makes me happy yet. And so, I mean, I'd like to propose that there be some kind of a fee increase, but conditions that there are further studies on trying to get to this. I mean, I believe that the commission and the Builders Association have worked together on any number of things and can get along famously and come to some agreement on all of this without delaying and pushing something off for another period of time. might tend to agree with Bruce, who indicated that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a $10,000 fee for a text amendment private development is probably a minor, in the grand scheme of things for some of these large developments. It's extra cost, yes, but in the big picture, it's not as big as it might appear to be just by looking at a difference between $1,000 and $11,000. So I guess I'm looking for suggestions on how we could structure a motion or something like that. Yes, that would demonstrate, at least from my perspective, our approval for rate increases, but strongly suggesting that some additional discussions and whatever take place to make sure to cement those numbers or to fine-tune them at a later date to a more palatable number. And I'll listen to what everybody else says.
Commissioner Kress?
Yeah, sorry, I think he asked some of the same questions I was going to.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner
Yes.
Dix? Oh, I'll get back. Commissioner Dix, I'll let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sincerely apologize about being here late. Somebody should do something about transportation around this county. Other than that, though, this is a particular issue that I spent a lot of time on this weekend, and I'm sorry I missed the presentation. I had a couple of questions, though, and please forgive me if we're being redundant, but I'm just wondering why and how the consultant came up with some numbers that seemed a little out of whack. For example, the one that Commissioner Doughty was talking about, I believe, was the text amendment. We go from basically $1,000 to an $11,000, but yet the map amendment, we go from $1,000 to $5,000, even though the consultant found that the cost of the map amendment was $8,663. So it didn't seem to have any consistency to me as far as the amounts that they were suggesting that would be increased. So I was wondering about that, and then I had an additional follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, if I can get that one answered first.
You can go ahead, Commissioner. Well, yeah, after. Bruce, can you answer Commissioner Dix's question?
I would concede that's my opinion. That's not fact, and you should take that under advisement. The reason the costs are what they are is because of staff explanation of the time required to do the work. So one may have a cost vastly greater than the current fee, to a greater degree than the other, because the time required for it is greater. These are all cost-based findings. But as to my recommendation, that's subjective. You know, I would lose no sleep if you don't accept my price recommendations. I would just say that if you only do this every few decades, we should not be surprised that the costs are much greater than you are currently charging. And my recommendations go to combination of trying to make fees actually pay for things, plus dampening it a little where I just think it might be problematic to charge full cost.
I guess you're missing my point is the point, at least of my first question is, if we're going to raise the fees to match the cost of the services rendered, it would seem that it should be universal across the board, so that, you know, if there is an 800% differential between the cost of a map amendment to what we're charging, then we raise it, you know, proportionately rather than to the 5,000, just like you're suggesting that we raise the text amendment.
I'd be fine with that, subject to Florida statute limitation not charging in excess of cost.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but that was what my question was. Why wasn't there consistency?
This is the subjective part of it about what kind of pricing makes sense. I think what I'm saying is generally, if it's been 30 years and if it's a lot more than you're charging, price should go up. But I would leave it to your judgment of what is appropriate for your community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then if I can, Mr. Chairman, just let me follow up with what I think I was hearing from Commissioner Doughty is that, you know, I'm certain that there's probably agreement and consensus on this board to charge fees that are consistent with the work product and the and the expenses that we go through. I have a real concern, however, with such dramatic lump sum fee increases at one time. Now, for my study of this, it indicates that those fees hadn't been adjusted in 30 years. You know, I don't want to point a finger at anybody and say that was a mistake that should have been rectified a long time ago, but I think it is a little unconscionable to ask this board to increase fees to as much as 1,000% overnight to a new petitioner, no matter whether that $1,000 to $11,000 fee adjustment is minor in the scheme of things or whether it is just in and of itself a dramatic increase. It's 1,000%. And over my lifetime of public service, I've had to increase fees. I've had to increase taxes. No, not taxes, but I've had to increase fees. And never before would I think that 1,000% increase is anything but unconscionable. So whatever kind of emotion that comes out of this, I would support it, but only if it was in some sort of a phased manner, and maybe it would be most appropriate to direct it back to staff to come up with some sort of a timetable to come up with some sort of a phase-in increase on fees. Thanks for that.
Yep, Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we should develop some criteria for that justify the increased costs, and also address the expectations for the level of service for those increased costs. I would recommend phasing those costs in over a 3-month period, or allow for a 90-day public comment period, or more, just more investigation of this, and then we take action in July.
So my only concern with that, and I do not disagree with the direction that you're going at all, but if on May 1st the Board of County Commissioners hears this, they potentially would not have any recommendation from the Planning Commission if they chose to move forward. And so I just want y'all to be clear that that's why, I mean, it would have been my preference to bring this as an informational item, get some more stakeholder input, but I think this was driven by the Board of County Commissioners asking for the study, and there is some likelihood. So I think if we can articulate that maybe in a motion of, you know, that those are some specific things that you would like to ask the Board of County Commissioners to do, phasing in the fees, getting some additional stakeholder input, looking at the level of service and some continued improvements. But if you just say staff go back and do this and you haven't weighed in, that's my concern, I guess.
You have follow up on that, Commissioner Green, or do you want to hear from the other commissioners? There's a couple others that want to speak. Okay. Commissioner Willman?
Thank you. I'm comfortable making the recommendation today with that additional language regarding, you know, providing some information about gradual increase, providing some criteria for level of service, but leaving that up to a later, you know, county commission being able to make that specific determination on what those should be. Is that?
Yeah,
would that be appropriate?
Yep. Commissioner Green?
Chairman, just for clarification, so Melissa, the county commission will take action on fees for.
We don't know.
We don't know. Okay.
But they will be presented a similar presentation. It actually will also include development services. Pieces of the study, and they might want to take action. And, you know, that's just my only concern, is if we don't have some sort of articulated motion from you all, that then I would not be able to say, this is what the Planning Commission thought about this. So if you can, even if it is that you think there should be more time and you'd like it to be some of these things addressed before that's made, if you can articulate it in the framing of a motion, that I can carry forward to the Board of County Commissioners, that would be helpful to me.
Okay. Commissioner Dowdy?
Melissa may have just kind of hit it on the end, because that's where I was going with this. Is that, I mean, I think what has been requested of us is, yeah, we need to make a recommendation. So, and I think I've heard from everybody here that we're saying, yeah, okay, raise fees, right? So we can make a recommendation that they raise the fees. However, it is also our recommendation, right, that we conduct further study to come to some consensus that we phase it over a period of time. I'm not, 3 months sounds pretty fast to me. I was thinking more in years when Commissioner Dix was speaking, as far as that goes. And you can trigger that. I mean, that the $500 changes are no big deals, but 10,000 is a big deal. So we can, you know, hey, there's something that maybe you phase it in, you know, a third, and boom, when we get there, like his point, and we haven't changed it for 30 years. If it takes 3 to get there, you know, okay. You know, that kind of a thought process. So I don't know that I'm being real articulate in that, but I'm trying to get to a motion of a sort.
The one thing I haven't heard from Melissa, so if we keep going in this direction with this fee structure, how does that impact the agency's budget?
So the agency's budget comes out of the countywide general fund. All of the revenue that we collect from whatever fees we charge goes back into the countywide general fund. So quite honestly, the countywide general fund would be recovering more of the costs that they are already accruing by giving us the budget that we do. So it's more about the county's budget, countywide budget, countywide general fund recovering more of that. I don't know that there's necessarily an immediate nexus to, well, our budget increases in some way, because we have never been a revenue-driven budget.
But we do have to cover these costs.
We are covering them right now with the countywide general fund.
Okay.
So the point that Bruce was making on the very first slide was that there's some subsidy by the public to these
And
services.
I would agree. I mean, not raising the prices doesn't, of course, make it cheaper. It says other people have to pay for it. It's not probably to the degree that a taxpayer would recognize it in these fees, but shifting a burden of funding the Planning Commission from taxes to fees should lighten the burden on taxpayers.
Is it fair to say at these levels, are we actually subsidizing?
Well,
the cost of
the cost of the service is more than what the applicants are paying
currently.
Yeah, for example, the first row, the map amendment there, yes, the $7,663 is the amount of taxpayer money that is being used to pay for the portion that the current fee does not pay.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Dix?
Well, I would be happy to second Commissioner Dowdy's motion, which was, I believe, as I was understanding what he was saying, was to raise the fees so that they would be in line with the cost of the service provided as determined by the consultant, but that it is our preference to do that over a 3-year time frame of 1/3 each.
Commissioner Dowdy, would you like to state that motion? Just exactly. So it's clear for the record? And I think you were pretty much right on when you were discussing it a few minutes ago.
So, fine. I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission approve the fees as recommended by the consultant with 2 conditions. One being that we increase those fees in a 3-year period, and the second condition be that the Planning Commission and the stakeholders start and continue coming to an agreeable resolution on the level of service anticipated.
That's second.
Okay. Got a motion by Commissioner Dowdy, second by Commissioner Dix. Any further discussion? Commissioner Green?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend Can I suggest?
Yeah.
The motion?
See if
Amending the
it's- see if
motion?
it's accepted.
Just to clarify the criteria for these costs or fee increases rather, particularly as they relate to the again the level of service that's expected from applicants, and also for develop clear criteria for where these costs or these fees could be either reduced or abated for affordable housing as an incentive, let's say. But those are two things I would just add to the.
Okay, Commissioner Dowdy, are you?
Let me ask Commissioner Green a question. Rather than just limiting it to affordable housing, I don't mind providing benefits, but there may be a number of situations where some fee reduction would be acceptable along those lines. And I putting that discussion into the context of determining this level of service, I'm perfectly fine with that amendment.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. The amended motion. That's
and don't
accepted.
ask me to restate that.
Yep. No, we're good. Any further discussion on that motion as stated by Commissioner Dowdy and seconded by Commissioner Dix? No further discussion. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Aye. Okay. We have 6 in favor, and Commissioner Joseph is opposed. Motion passes. We are going to move on to item number 4 on our agenda. It's the presentation of the update of the airport construction projects.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to give you an update on the airport construction projects that we have going on, but first give you a quick overview of the airport in general. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Janet Scherberger, Vice President of Communications at Tampa International Airport. So everybody knows about Tampa International Airport. We also manage 3 general aviation airports, Tampa Executive, Peter O. Knight on Davis Islands, and the Plant City Airport. And I'm going to focus on Tampa International Airport, but I want to take a minute here to pause and mention Tampa Executive to you because that's a really important airport to us right now. It's located in the northwest of the I-4 I-75 interchange. And as I'm sure you're all aware, that's an area that's slated for a significant amount of growth in future years. So what we're looking at right now as we've been working very closely with Planning Commission staff and the MPO staff, particularly Planning Commission, on making sure that all of our growth projections for our airport are incorporated into the comprehensive plan update for 2045, including what our needs are for infrastructure for that airport. And then we're also going to be looking at making sure that the land use surrounding that airport is compatible because, again, we know there's going to be a lot of growth in that area. There's going to be a lot of growth at our airport, and we want to make sure that we can still function and serve the county as well as Tampa International going forward. These general aviation airports are really important because as the airport grows and the commercial service flights continue to grow at Tampa International, we depend on these airports to serve as relievers and for the smaller aircraft to be able to use those airports so that they're not interacting with the commercial aircraft at Tampa International. So I just want to call your attention to that because you might see some more about that in the next year or so. So just a reminder, the enabling legislation that founded Tampa International Airport calls on us to promote the development of commerce and tourism in our region and our state. So that's our driving principle for Tampa International Airport. These are the most recent economic impact figures that we have from the Florida Department of Transportation that we just got a couple weeks ago. So there are about 10,000 people who work at the airport. We support 121,000 jobs and have a $14.4 billion economic impact on the region. The last economic impact study that was done by the Florida Department of Transportation was in 2014. Our economic impact output number has doubled since then, and the number of people employed by the airport and its tenants have increased from about 7,500 to almost 11,000 now. So we've seen a lot of growth just in the last 4 years. And as always, we get top honors for customer satisfaction. A lot of that is because of the great design that we inherited, this administration, but we all work really hard on making sure that the customer service and the functioning of that airport keeps up with that great design and is true to that original vision. So in 2018, we had a record number of passengers, 21 million. We're expecting another record in 2019, 22 million. We keep on growing. This is our route portfolio, 90 destinations, 19 international, 71 domestic. We talk a lot about our international service, but we've also seen a lot of growth in our domestic service. So we've added 43 new domestic flights since 2010, including 14 new airports served and a 52% increase in competitive markets. The competitive markets is important because that's what helps us drive down the airfare, right? So if it's American that is serving a city, and then you get JetBlue or Spirit serving that city, then that provides an alternative, an option for passengers and be able to get to those popular cities a little less expensively. This is all the new international, new nonstop international service that we've added since 2010. I'm not going to read them all to you. You can see them up there on the screen. I'm sure you've heard about them in the news and seen news about it on social media. And Amsterdam is our next new flight that we're announcing on May 23rd, where we're launching on May 23rd. So we're really excited about that on Delta. And that's an interesting one because it's a American mainliner flight that is flying to a European destination. A lot of our international flights in the past have been, it's on Edelweiss and Copa, Lufthansa. So this is a U.S. carrier that's flying to Europe. So we've seen a nearly doubling of our international enplanements since 2010, and that's important because that has an economic impact of $1.6 billion on our community and supports nearly 18,000 jobs, just that growth. And that's because those are all these people who are coming to the Tampa Bay area and staying in our hotels and eating in our restaurants and visiting the Riverwalk and doing all those cool things that there are to do in Hillsborough County and the Tampa Bay region. These are our targets for the future. We've got 5 targets. These were just developed about 2 years ago. We had our previous targets we had developed about 7 years ago, but we started checking those off. So these are the 5 that we have. A couple of them have remained on there. Bogota, Mexico City, Dublin are on there. Lima is new. Manchester is new. But we've already got Amsterdam was a target. Panama City was a target. Frankfurt was a target. We've got those taken care of. So we continue to work on these others and then added a few new destinations. Cargo growth has been a real significant area. How many of you have ordered something from Amazon in the last week?
Not week.
Or in the last hour while you were debating. So a lot of we've had a huge growth in cargo. This was completely unexpected for us. We had plans for cargo growth, but when we were first working on our master plan in 2012, people were not ordering on Amazon the way they are just 7 years later. And then all of a sudden we have all these flights. We have this huge cargo growth with Amazon, and Prime Air, which you see on the screen here, did not even exist 3 years ago. So, and then UPS came over to Tampa International Airport because they wanted to grow. So they came from Pi. So we've just seen this enormous cargo growth. We continue to see cargo growth. We had a warehouse, warehouse building that was slated for, it was just mothballed. We were basically going to tear it down, and now it is bustling. It's full. It's a logistics center for Amazon where they sort packages and have trucks coming in and going. It's just this whole huge operation that we had never anticipated, but it's a big growth area for us. So our operating revenues are up $240 million. That's partly driven by passenger growth, but partly driven by also just value-added services. We have a better concessions program than we had in the past. You know, we used to sell dog treats. Now we sell crystals. We used to sell hamburgers. Now we sell grilled oysters at Eulalie, and it's obviously you don't have to buy that stuff. There are low-cost options if you want, but there are also some great dining options at the airport. And then we have things like valet service where you can get your car parked and detailed while you're traveling. So here's a look at our net operating revenues, $224 million. We collect no tax dollars for operations. We have the ability to levy property taxes. We do not do that. We do get taxpayer dollars from the Florida Department of Transportation for capital projects, but none of it for operations. So now, what the news you've all been waiting for, our master plan update. This is the 20-year passenger forecast that we developed in about 2012 that is driving all of our expansion. You can see the green box on there that shows that we are on target. We are hitting all of our passenger targets that we anticipated. So it's a good thing that we are doing this project. Our airport, as it was built before we started this, was able to handle somewhere between 23 and 25 million annual passengers. And as I mentioned to you, we just hit 21 million passengers last year, 22 million in 2019. So as we would not have been able to function. We would have had gridlock at our roadways. I mean, one of the things that we did for Master Plan Phase 1 was try to get cars off the roads. Now again, we were thinking about that in 2012 before Uber and Lyft came on board. Right? So now we have a huge issue at our curbsides with these ride-sharing companies that are using our curbsides that were not using them before. So it's a good thing that we did what we did and that we had the plan that we had because, you know, we're busy now, we're functioning, we're doing well, but had we not done this, it would have been a really, really difficult spring break that we just came out of where we literally had record numbers of passengers going through the airport every day. You know, you think about it, the airport that has you're talking about transportation issues, that we have about 10,000 people who work at the airport, and then you have somewhere between 30 and 40,000 passengers going to, that's just enplanement. So it's about 60 to 70,000 people a day coming and going to the airport between the people who are flying in, flying out, and working there. That is a lot of people going to one little area. So the roadways all around us are very busy, and we're looking forward to having transportation improvements that will help people get in and out of the airport. So Phase 1 was of our master plan was a $981 million project. We've basically finished it in February of 2018. It's our Sky Connect train system, our rental car center, and MTAC stands for Master Main Terminal and Airport Concessions. Right, thank you, Mitch. So the Sky Connect connects the main terminal to the rental car center. This is as I said, concessions were a big part of our expansion program. So we have lots of great restaurants and great local restaurants, actually. A lot of them are at the airsides, but we're about to, pretty soon, this is a secret. We're going to have a program where we're going to actually allow people to have on one day a week to be able to go to the airsides and be able to enjoy some of those restaurants that you can't get to if you don't have a ticket. So there'll be a process for people to be able to do that. We think that that'll be really popular. This is a look at the rental car center, and those little like killer whale looking things are actually places where you can get a boarding pass and a check your bag, so that people who are renting cars don't have to haul their bags all the way to the main terminal. They can check them right there at the rental car center and get their boarding pass. We're the only airport in the country that has a system like that. So it's probably, not all the airlines are on there, but it serves a good 60% of our passengers. All the biggest airlines are on there. You can't do international on there, but you can do Southwest, Delta, United, and American, I think. So that's an aerial view of what the airport looks like. You can see we're really close to the water, and the runway particularly close to the water. So lots of conversations now about resiliency and what the airport can do to make sure that we can continue to function if we have issues with sea level rise. This is a look at the economic impact of Phase 1 at the airport. A lot of people working on it, 2,000 construction workers on site during our peak days, and about 10,000 people in our community actually worked on the airport project. So how did this impact regional transportation? So we built a transit curb down at the rental car center. And as a result of building that transit curb, we have gone from having one public bus route to the airport to having 6, including the first ever from Pinellas County, which is express service that goes from Park and Ride in Largo, comes to Tampa International Airport, and then goes downtown and back. And then we actually have an express bus on Hart that comes from Pasco County down 275, stops around USF and downtown in the airport. So we've really enabled transit at the airport, and we're really proud of that. It's a pretty nice curb that's covered. And again, as I said, that there's, if people are actually traveling, they can go right up to the rental car center, check their bag there, and then take the train to the main terminal. So it's a pretty cool amenity that came about just almost as an aside. So phase 2 of our master plan is a curbside expansion. Still more that we need to do with curbs. This is going to be 4 new lanes, so 16 new curbs, 4 new lanes at each. We've got a blue side or red side or arrivals and departures for 4 new lanes at each of those. Those are going to be express curbs. It'll be specifically for people that are not checking bags, so you'll be able to move really quickly and not have to interact with the people who are unloading their cars. And then we're doing this Sky Center development area, which in this group I can call it transit-oriented development, because it's right across the street from that transit curb and the train station, the Sky Connect train station. Again, the curbside expansion, you can get a closer look at what that's going to look like. But the Sky Center, let's talk about that a little bit more. This is a look at the, again, as I said, sort of transit-oriented development all around that curb, where we're right now, our board just last week approved the developer for a 9-story office building that will be connected to that train station by a covered pedestrian walkway. But going forward after that, there should be a lot more development. We're thinking another potentially office building, another hotel, a convenience store, a gas station, or who knows, maybe an electric vehicle charging station instead. So a lot more that can be developed around that area. And then this is kind of hard to see, but what it's supposed to show is that part of this project includes the pink on that is a trail that winds through our development, but it also connects to the regional trail network, which to me is one of the coolest things that FDOT is doing. They don't get enough credit for this regional trail network that they're doing all over the state. But we'll be linked right into that, and you'll be able, we've been talking to the city also about making sure those improvements on O'Brien Street include bike and pedestrian walkways so that people can get easily to the airport. And again, I don't think you'll ever be able to ride a bike all the way up to the main terminal. That parkway getting into the airport is pretty busy, but you could park your bike down around where the Sky Connect station is and then be able to take a train there. And we're hoping in the next phase of our master plan to have a pretty decent bike parking area that will be covered, and maybe even have some places where you can maintain your bike and try to be really bike friendly. And then again, second phase, this is an old aerial picture, but I put it up here to show you that 270 feet is where we currently have our transit curb, but we're actually already planning on expanding that because just the 5 new buses that we have every day coming to the airport is that airport is almost that curb is almost at capacity, and we want to make a little bit more room so that we can keep on accommodating different kinds of transit and bus at that location. So this is just pretty pictures now of what that development area will look like that our board just approved. Over to the right, you see the office building. You see the elevated walkway that connects to an atrium that connects to the office building, and it all connects over to that train station. And the other side of that atrium is where we'll build a hotel. So this is a aerial version of it, just sort of a massing, so you can see where that in the very center is the new office building connected by the walkway to the rental car center. Here's another look at it, another curb. So you can't have too much curb these days with the growth of the Lyft and the Uber, and then potentially, or the likelihood, eventuality at some point in the future of automated vehicles, where people are going to have pickup and drop off is going to become more important than parking. So we're really planning for that. Another view of it. And then phase 3 of the master plan. So We're already talking about phase 3 of the master plan, which is a 16-gate airside. So that will probably, we're already doing a little bit of planning on it. You'll start hearing more about it publicly, probably in the next year or two. And we'd like to have that online by 2024 or so. And that's all I got. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Any questions? Commissioner Marina?
If I could just make a comment, the airport has been very helpful working with the organization I work for, West Shore Alliance, on the pedestrian accessibility and bicycle friendly. Pittsburgh and LaGuardia, I mean, apparently this might be the one thing LaGuardia does right. They have very good pedestrian access, and Pittsburgh actually is a bike trail that goes into their property. And then the last thing I'll add too, for traveling with children, that remote bag drop off, park in economy and go backwards, and then drop everything and go back. That saved that saved me and my toddler a few months ago. So I'm very appreciative.
Well, just since we put that train in, we've seen like a 20-25% increase in use of our economy parking garage. People love it because the train is easier anyway, but a lot of people are going back and using that remote bag check. It's wildly popular. So it's been really interesting. Of course, the economy parking is parking is really important revenue source for us, and that is our lowest price point. So park in short term if you can.
Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jen, I want to go back to, I have a couple of questions, but the first image you showed with the with TIA and then the general aviation facilities. Now, of course, all of our ports and our airports, our interstate systems are part of the strategic intermodal system.
Right.
Are the general aviation facilities considered part of that?
They're not, no. Well, I don't know about the other two. I know for a fact that Tampa Executive isn't, because that's something that we've been looking at it really closely right now. I don't know about Davis Islands or Plant City. I'm not sure. But the Plant City, the Tampa Executive Airport is not.
Okay.
And I would imagine the others are not. Tampa International is a CIS facility, but I don't think that the general aviation airports are.
Okay. I was just curious because I live over on that side of the county and or in Temple Terrace, and I see that as that airport growing in the future strategically because of the expansion of the innovation zone or district.
Correct.
Near the university, and because of the I-4 high-tech corridor, of course, as it gets underway. So I was just curious about the airport's plans for expansion or reclassification or whatever for that facility. So.
Well, we're in the process right now. As I said, it's something that we're focusing on a lot. So we're in the process now of looking at what the future of that airport might look like in terms of what we might do with the runway there and what kind of development we might have there and how it could grow. It's a little bit constrained right now because we have access issues. There's not a good way to get to the airport. Yeah. There was a period of time when there were plans to improve the actual access by vehicles, people who to get in and out of it. But it ended up going off the books. We're trying to get that back on the books. And as I said, working really closely with the MPO and the Planning Commission staff on making sure that all that continues to move forward and the airport is included in those planning discussions.
Okay. And my next question, of course, is the one that a lot of people continuously ask about transit connectivity to the airport, particularly from the planned intermodal, West Shore Intermodal Center. Of course, we do have bus transit now, going directly to the airport, but the big question is, how will that connection be made? I know years ago when we worked with the West Shore Alliance, there was some thoughts about how it could be connected, but in recent years, I haven't heard any discussions about plans for making that physical connection. And I realize we're going off airport property,
right?
Of course, but is that still, is it even part of the discussions in terms of?
It's something that we talk about on on a fairly regular basis, both considering the needs of the West Shore Alliance. We are talking about it with the West Shore Alliance as well, and FDOT. We meet quarterly with FDOT, and that's something that we talk about. We've looked at various alignments and what the best way would be to get from the West Shore Multimodal Center to the airport. You have to consider like what might happen with BRT, like how might BRT get to the airport, and what is the best way to do that. The rental car center was built to be able to accommodate even fixed guideway rail, fixed guideway transit rail that could come right into the second level of the airport, you know, and make it really easy to get in there. So we've made our facility to be able to accept whatever makes sense for the community, but there are a lot of things to figure in terms of right-of-way and the road network all around it, and what makes the most sense. Is it fixed guideway? Is it something, just a circulator? Is it rail? Is it BRT? There are so many different options out there, and the conversations keep changing, so we're trying to follow them and be fluid and accommodating and supportive of what makes the most sense for the community.
Okay, good. I just raised the question because, again, you know, I hear people asking that question, and for me, you know, I'm seeing with the airport master plan well underway, and with other transit initiatives that are likely on the horizon, I think this moves us in a totally new era, right, in terms of connectivity. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Chris.
Yeah, Commissioner Green stole my question again, but I did want to thank you for your advocacy toward embracing other modes. 6 different routes going from 1 to 6 is great, and then to hear that you're going to have a bike component in your next phase is thrilling, so thank you. And just for comparison's sake, it sounds like you have the same number of people coming to the airport every day as we have working in downtown Tampa. So that's an interesting comparison.
Yep.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I'll be able to use that in future presentations.
That's good. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5 on our agenda. It's the 2045 Long Range Transportation Update.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. Today I'm going to go over the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan update. Every few years, the MPO is tasked with updating our long range transportation plan. So I'm going to do sort of a high-level overview of what we did when we put together the 2040 plan, as well as where we're at and where we're going with the 2045 LRTP update. So last go around was sort of the time where we moved towards performance-based planning. So at this point, we sort of grouped all the projects within what we called programs or buckets. We looked at economic growth within the area, and then had the revenue estimates to go along with those. So again, here are the 5 buckets that we created last time. This is sort of preserving the system, reducing crashes and vulnerability, minimizing traffic for drivers and shippers, real choices when not driving, and then the major capacity projects for economic growth. So the first 4 buckets were sort of the programs that we had the projects less, I guess, prescriptive, you can say. Preserving the system, we looked at resurfacing roadways, repairing our bridges, and also bus replacements for HART. For the reducing crashes and vulnerability, we looked at what were the total crashes on a roadway. We looked at the more severe crashes as well as the walk-bike crashes. And then what the vulnerability piece is sort of that resiliency, what would be the impact of a major storm to directly hit us. For our minimizing traffic for drivers and shippers, that was sort of our congestion management one, looking at smaller ticket, bigger bang kind of projects, the ITS, signalizing stuff, looking at peak hour travel time reliability, and as well as truck traffic. And then our real choices for real choices for non-drivers is our transit, looking at trails, that kind of stuff. So what was the priority for getting people within their homes and to their jobs? So as part of our outreach, we took each of these programs and we gave different high, medium, and low investment levels, and we let people play around with what they would fund or what levels they would fund each of these programs. And that's sort of how we got everything sorted. So this is the reducing crashes. You can see these are just sort of examples. When we looked at our major capacity projects, these are the bigger ticket ones, we worked closely with the county and the cities and looked at what we called key economic spaces. These are those major job centers, and how do those affect or the future forecast for congestion, as well as how do we support those projects. We then looked at most or all of those major projects, got them into groups based on where they were located, and asked people, which areas would you fund for these bigger ticket projects? So again, the first four were sort of the, we did not item out every single project. It's sort of a percentage goes towards making sure that we can maintain our resurfacing programs, replace our buses, also making sure a certain percentage went towards walk bike safety projects, increasing our ATMS, our ITS, the signalizing, that kind of stuff. Right now, we are in the process of, like I said, updating our long-range transportation plan. We also have the Transportation Improvement Program that is updated every year. This is that first 5 years of the LRTP, so this is sort of how we fund those projects that are within the LRTP. And then right now we're getting into our needs analysis, so we've been working with each of the jurisdictions on which projects should be included in that needs analysis for modeling input. Like I said, we've met with everybody, they've given us their input, and then at this point, the MPO will take action in November for that. So this is another, how you can see the tip relates back to the funding of these projects. Again, this is just sort of an example of some projects and how they were funded through this process. We also look at different other efforts that are going on in the region. So we have the strategic intermodal system projects, the FDOT moves forward. We also look at each of the jurisdictions and what they have in their community transportation plans, as well as getting input from HART. We have the regional transit feasibility plan that's moving forward, as well as previous studies that the MPO has done. This is from our transit assets and opportunity study in 2014 that looked at how we can modernize the streetcar as well as extending in it and where we would go with that, as well as utilizing the CSX tracks throughout the county. And then we also had the Tri-County vision that came from part one of our outreach. And like I said, right now we're in the needs assessment. We will then go back out in public outreach in June, and then we're slated for plan adoption in November. We do have the workshop next month that you'll be doing with our technical advisory committee. And so at this point, it's sort of that high level, like I said, overview, and then if you have any input that you'd like to provide. This is really sort of just getting you ready for that workshop where you will be working with the TAC next month. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay. Yeah, Melissa?
So I haven't had a chance to tell them about the workshop with the TAC
sorry.
yet, so that's okay. So I'll do that now. I was going to be part of my executive director's report and didn't think about the timing being out of order. What we've been hearing your interest in wanting to do more collaboration with the between land use and transportation, and so we've talked to the MPO has a technical advisory committee, and they are the ones who really are often in the weeds on which projects make the most sense and why and what need are they serving. And so we wanted to spend some time connecting you all with them to talk about some of the land use implications of some of these transportation projects that are being proposed to go into the needs plan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually do the workshop next month first before the regular meeting. So we'll do it at 2 o'clock so that all the TAC members are available during the workday, and they might not be available at 4:30 when your regular meeting is done. So we'll do that at 2 o'clock and then have your regular meeting either start at 3 or 3:30 based on what the rest of the Planning Commission agenda looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one question for Sarah. The CSX tracks, particularly as they go through East Tampa.
Yes.
I know they've been looked at before. Years ago, they were considered around the time of the first 2010 light rail referendum. Then it seemed like they just sort of dropped off the map, and now they're back again, being considered. But in what capacity? In other words, can you go back to your slide that sort of showed the right there? Okay, now this is part of the. It's not in the tip.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not in the 5-year work program at this point.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I was just wanting to know, well, what was the status of MPO's sort of consideration of the CSX?
We have been talking a lot with Hart on what the next steps for that would be. There was an environmental impact statement that was done years ago, so sort of dusting that off, revisiting that would probably be the next steps. That would be up to the Hart board to take that step. But we are, as part of our needs and most likely as part of the cost affordable, moving that project forward as what could be utilized for that surtax, the certain percentage that Hart gets of that 45%. We know that 35% has to go towards fixed guideway. So it would sort of be moving forward in that sense.
Okay. And my last question has to do with the envisioned intermodal facility up in the USF area.
Okay, yes.
And again, we've seen maps, of course, with transit routes going to that area, but no location yet. Okay, how is that going to be sorted out, or because I think that's going to be a facility that might need to be advanced, let's say, because of what's happening up there. And
well, that's very timely because that is your workshop this afternoon, looking into the university area intermodal center. So we do have the consultants here, so they will be able to discuss that later as part of the workshop.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. You were talking about that phase 2 survey. Was that a public survey that was?
We've not done it yet. It'll be going out in June.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So the input you'll be giving at the workshop in May will help go into that outreach as well.
Okay, great. And can we get access to the PowerPoint that we?
Yes.
Read through? Okay. Thank you. That's okay.
Thank you. You mentioned key economic spaces on one of your slides, Pat. Could you just talk a little bit about those? And send me a copy of that map that they were on also. Thank you.
This was sort of the policy leadership group that the county did years ago. At the same time, we were doing the Imagine 2040 plan. And it was, I think it was 11, I want to say, of the top job centers within the county. So sort of we buffered each of those job centers and then looked at how basically what's the access to each of these areas from where the population lives.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is item 6 on our agenda, the East Fowler Avenue Land Use Study.
Planning Commissioners, Pedro Parr with the Planning Commission staff. This is item 6, it's known as the East Fowler Land Use Study. So this study, we've been looking at the data and background and building a background document that looks at the area between I-275 and just beyond I-75 to the bypass canal. If you look at the map, you'll see that that area involves 3 different jurisdictions that are adjacent to Fowler Avenue, unincorporated Hillsborough County, the city of Tampa, and the city of Temple Terrace. We were requested to look at this area as part of an initiative by the Tampa Innovation Partnership. They asked us to participate in a planning activity that would look at future options based on existing conditions that might be brought forward for Fowler Avenue. So we looked at the existing development conditions. I'll walk through some of those, zoning and future land uses. And we were looking at a way to categorize the objectives that the IP holds in terms of its cornerstone institutions, and in terms of the stakeholders that we brought into the process as we move through this. So again, the Innovation Partnership asked us to look at, as part of their development discussions ranging from transportation to residential uses along the Fowler Avenue. Once we started looking at it, we began with saying, let's take a look at the literature that exists in terms of development practices for innovation districts. Let's look at the parcel build-out and the land value data that's available to us, and let's identify the area that's adjacent to Fowler Avenue. So we did a 300-foot north and south of Fowler, all along the corridor from I-275 to just past I-75. Our purpose was to engage the different jurisdictions, Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County. We did that by notifying each of the jurisdictions that we were looking at this, at what opportunities there were. We collected the data, and then early in 2018, we brought all of the staffs together, and we looked at the information collectively. We've also been out to Temple Terrace and made a presentation to them, and we've made we just finished a stakeholder engagement to ask property owners to come in, and we did it based on the draft background document that you have been looking at as part of this presentation. Initially, the future land use recommendations that we were formulating around were, could this area be looked at in the comprehensive plans for all of the 3 jurisdictions individually as a special or unified planning area? And then what were the specific kinds of future land use options that were available? So we began, again, at the beginning of the document, you're going to see a very recent mixed-use corridor and redevelopment look at across the country of some of the different initiatives taking place. The State Street in Salt Lake City, Utah, the redesign of Richmond Highway in Fairfax, Virginia, the Sears Crosstown conversion in Memphis, Tennessee, and Fremont, which is a transit-oriented new development in California. So from the initial studies that are the most recent that we did after we had completed most of the study, we went back to see if we were still up to date on them. What we found is that these State Street, Richmond Highway, Sears Crosstown, and Fremont all included a variety of design techniques that were being applied related to the specific location, the region and its demand, and the history of that area. They were also developments that were spread linearly along matching existing corridors, and that the construction could develop both vertically and high and mid-rise in the same kind of development or separately and individually. So in the mixed-use corridor and the redevelopment examples, we looked at 15 other studies across the country. We looked at Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Buffalo, New York, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Cleveland, Ohio, Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan, Houston, Texas, Kansas City, Missouri, Lincoln, Nebraska, Nashville, Tennessee, Phoenix, Arizona, and St. Louis. And our premise of looking at those were how closely they resembled some feature of the Tampa Innovation District. So what we found is almost all of these were suburban kind of development patterns that existed at the time the innovation process were brought in, but they were all moving towards suburban. And all of them characterize their development as suburban, as urban level development. So they're moving from suburban to initiate a lot of the changes to an urban level development pattern. Again, I'm just going to walk through how we gathered the information. So in the packet, we looked at this half-mile transportation buffer, which is north and south, so about a quarter mile on each side. We looked at the parcels abutting within 300 feet. That's the process we used to notify people and to let people know what we were doing out here. We looked at the future land use, zoning, and existing uses, and we drew data from the property appraiser's record at the close of 2017. So Under the existing land use, we have provided in the document a cross-tabulation of by jurisdiction of the existing land use that occurred. So you'll see the land use, the existing land use, and then you'll see each of the jurisdictions, and it'll tell you where there have commonalities in terms of that existing use. And we also cross-tabulated on a separate table the existing uses that exist along the corridor, but it's for all jurisdictions, it's for the entire boundary, but we looked at the number of parcels, we looked at the parcel percentage, we looked at the acreage, we looked at the acre percentage by jurisdiction. In the future land use, again, we did a cross-tabulation by jurisdiction by land use category, the number of parcels, parcel percentages, acreage, and acreage percentage. And we broke out each of the jurisdictions by Hillsborough County, Tampa, and Temple Terrace, since they couldn't be cross-tabulated one to another. We also cross-tabulated by future land use typology, so under general categories of the types of land use by jurisdiction. And under zoning, we cross-tabulated by jurisdiction the zoning district and the number of parcels, parcel percentage, acreage, and the acreage percentage by jurisdiction. We broke those again out by jurisdiction, and we cross-tabulated the zoning typology so that you could see the kind of zoning categories by typology as they compare to one another. Although we didn't include it in the actual discussion of what we were doing in terms of the recommendations, we also did look as part of the discussion so that people who were in the meetings and who were talking about it, who had special interest, could identify these different things. We looked at existing trails and bike lanes. We mapped the existing sidewalks, the existing and proposed USF bull runner lines. We looked at the existing transit level of services. We looked at employment density. We looked at the percentage of change in employment between 2010 and 2040. The population density that was projected in 2040, the percentage of population between 2010 and 2040. We looked at the high crash hotspots, and we looked at other crashes and bus stops. So that was data that we plugged into the document in case somebody comes in and they've got special interest, they could look at that. So I've gotten to this point, and I'll tell you, what you're seeing here is a foundation for a further discussion. We've had a discussion, but we wanted to bring this data together. We created a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that identifies these by parcel. And so we have all of this logged by parcel, so you can now take one specific parcel and you can run the existing future land use, and we're going to look at what we were able to do with some of that. So with the future land use category as a base, we extrapolated what the existing residential build-out percentage was, and we mapped them by color. But this could also, you could also take it back to the table, and you could then, if in a discussion of specific parcels, you can look at that specifically and have further discussion there. We also provided, based on the future land use category as a base, the percentage of existing remaining potential residential build-out. So we tried to look at both sides. Then we turned to the FAR, the density, the existing density potential. So it's percentage of existing FAR development based on the existing flu category. And the remaining potential of FAR development based on the flu category. Now, we've recognized as we've gone out towards the end of the project that some of these parcels are mislabeled by the local jurisdiction or mislabeled in the property appraisers. We have not gone back and corrected that. It was part of our original data gathering, but that can be done as we further the projects because we've identified which those are. We've got a running list of which parcels they are. An example would be Greco High School as a public use, as opposed to a residential use. So I'm going to pick up here. Then what we did is, after we'd gathered this data and we looked at a comparison of the different kinds of data that we'd gathered, we went out and we did a survey, a questionnaire survey of the executive board members of the IP. So we spoke to Florida Hospital, we spoke to Haley Veterans Hospital, we talked to Moffitt, we talked to Busch Gardens, so we talked to the mall representatives. We talked to the representatives from the USF research, and that conversation we were questioning around some of the parameters of a mixed-use kind of development that would further what they intended for their properties or what they saw for the IP as a whole, because these people are representing. They are the executive board for the Tampa Innovation Partnership. I already mentioned we talked separately to the Research Development Park representatives, and then we've had ongoing conversations at every opportunity with stakeholders. I said we did a stakeholder meeting recently. So out of that, what we came up with was a set of, again, we were looking at long-range land use needs and options. So the recommendations that we looked at were to recognize in this area along Fowler Avenue, specifically between 275 and just beyond 30th Street, which would include the Research Corporate Park, because these seem to be the places where the IP and its stakeholders were saying development was ready to occur in this fashion. Many of you will probably remember we just provided a plan amendment for the mall, for the University Mall. And one of the reasons that moved forward is that the comprehensive plans recognize the university area as one of the major employment and development centers in Hillsborough County. West Shore and downtown have already taken off. They've been developing for a while. What hasn't taken off is this area. So in that conversation we had, the general conversation was that the critical point has been reached for those areas, those research, technical, hospital innovations that are happening from the university and along Fletcher Avenue and along 30th Street to warrant a takeoff and a redevelopment of a lot of these sites. We said it should be recognized in each of the jurisdictions individually at first, but the overall would be to have a common conversation about what kinds of shared concepts there are for future land use and the land use categories and any commonality for zoning. Also that they assess based on the urban level mixed use categories information that's in the plan about updates for those properties specifically between I-275 and USF and the Research Park just past 30th Street. Where we're going next is we would like to submit this now to the local jurisdictions to give them a few weeks to digest it and then to contact them again about what the next steps might be, and that would include Temple Terrace, Tampa, and Hillsborough County. So I have examples of the other kind of maps, but that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pedro, thanks for the presentation. I tried to dig into this, and I found it quite informative, especially the numbers you were talking about earlier in terms of, I guess, development capacity based on the land use designations that are out there. But I had a number of observations. I won't go and get into all of them because I did go back and actually take a look at some of the corridors that you also used as sort of case studies or examples, let's say. Let's see. My first question has to do with the. This study covers 3 jurisdictions.
Yes.
And when I saw the first map, I said, okay, well, that goes from Temple Terrace over to Tampa, in the Hillsborough County, and then back again. And one of your earlier statements talked about this as a special area. So I'm wondering is there such a thing as a multi-jurisdiction overlay? I mean, can we look at it in that way to address the special nature of this area?
I think there's definitely the opportunity for that, and I think that our organization is in the unique position to be able to identify things like that because we work on all 4 local government comprehensive plans. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm wondering, again, if that could be part of the recommendation for the next phase of this or something like that. The main question I had to ask you, though, had to do with something I raised earlier with Sarah, which is that CSX corridor. Okay. Now, once it reaches close to Fowler Avenue at the western end, of course, there's a spur that goes to the east, towards the east. And I'm not sure if it's still all entirely owned by CSX or if it's a portion of it's been, you know, abandoned or sold or what. But was that considered as a potential transit line or light rail line coming up to the heart of this USF area, let's say?
We did not make any recommendations about transit in this land use study. There is a study going on of the East Fowler in terms of mobility study. One of the reasons that we've been at this for a year is that study started at the same time as our study. And so that study has not been completed yet. And so we're hoping that, that we will be able to maybe bring back a report on where that study is, because their classifications for roadways and what Fowler is and what the urban level mixed use probably are incompatible today and would need to be looked at again.
Okay. I just raised the issue again because I am familiar with the transit study, or transportation study, let's say, but again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I'm wondering about how do these studies sort of connect? How do they align with each other as well?
Well, that was part of our goal, was to try to bring many of these things together, and part of why we had Pedro present the Fowler study right before we have the workshop discussing the multimodal center in that area, because there are a lot of things going on. Unfortunately, they aren't all quite landing at the same time, but we are trying to use this as an opportunity to shape how DOT views Fowler as a roadway, maybe differently than a suburban
arterial.
Arterial. If we want it to be something that has a more urban character, more walkable, this is the first steps towards articulating that in our plans.
Well, I think you've done a good job in laying the groundwork for that. So thank you for the. I know you've been at this for a while. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Willman.
2 quick questions. The first one is, so on some of the maps you were showing that the area it looked like was going beyond the 300-foot corridor or the buffer on the north side, especially like north of Fletcher.
If the parcel was within 300 feet and it extended beyond, we captured all of that parcel.
So that USF north of Fletcher, that's just
right.
That's all
it's the same parcel, and
it
just captures it.
Okay. And my second question is, what's the schedule for policy development where there could be new policies coming out that would be then added to the comprehensive plans?
In terms of the next steps, again, we want to get this to the local jurisdictions, have them look at it and see if they're willing to move forward with some initiatives, and then we can have a discussion about bringing forward plan amendments for each of the jurisdictions that in Tampa would recognize a Fowler Avenue as a special area of study, in the county the same area as a special area of study, and then the discussion with Temple Terrace about whether they want to do the same thing. That could happen at any time at any of the regular plan amendments. I think the actual recommendations for land use would come after that. They would come after they've come together and had that discussion. Then the time frame for that could be any time there is a plan amendment in the plan amendment schedule.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you. I just want to add one other thing. This is the first project in the time I've been with the Planning Commission that involved almost everybody on staff. We involved graduate students, so usually we have hired consultants to do this work. This is the first time we took on this kind of project and brought in everybody and everybody's expertise within the Planning Commission, and we hope we've given credit to all of them. Okay, thank you, thank you. We're to move on to City of Tampa plan amendments, briefings. First up is Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-03.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jay Collins, Planning Commission staff. This briefing will be your February cycle of comprehensive plan amendments for the City of Tampa. There are 3 map amendments and 1 text amendment. The first one, 1903, is in the South Tampa Planning District. This is in the Gandy-Sun Bay South area, and this is also, again, part of your Transitional Use 24 Land Use Viability Study. So the area is outlined there in red with the yellow. This is 2 parcels. They are both in public ownership, one of which is the state of Florida, the other is the City of Tampa. Just to orient ourselves to where we are, this is Manhattan running north and south. The amendment site here to the east, single family detached primarily to the west. The school district's Robinson High School to the north. And then there's some apartment complexes further to the east, as well as some industrial uses further to the south as you approach Interbay Boulevard. So this is publicly initiated, as these Transitional Use 24 amendments are. This is regular scale. It's just over 16.5 acres, and staff is requesting the public, semi-public land use category here. A little bit just for the future land use map, you can see the Transitional Use 24 on the site that we spoke about. You can see residential 20 running to the west along Manhattan. To the north, where you see that, where the cursor now is, that is actually now public, semi-public. The City Council for the City of Tampa did adopt that amendment. We run on a quarterly basis here to update our map, so in a couple of months, that map will be updated. And if the amendment were to be adopted, you can see the public, semi-public land use. So some of the potential intensities and densities here, again, Transitional Use 24 allows for residential uses as well as industrial and commercial uses. So the existing potential on this site, which is in the coastal high hazard area, is just under 400 units of residential development, just over 1 million square feet of non-residential development, which can include industrial uses. The potential being public, semi-public are those facilities that are churches, hospitals, schools, in this case recreation, being that these areas are actually part of the South Tampa Greenways. That South Tampa Greenways connects Gandy to Picnic Island, then back across the peninsula to Bayshore all the way into downtown. So that's the idea of what this property is to be used for in the future. That concludes this part of the presentation.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yeah, Jay.
Sorry.
I guess the parcel that's owned by the state, is that the old railroad parcel just north of Interbay?
The old railroad, the 50-foot right-of-way that runs directly to the east, is actually owned by the City of Tampa.
No.
The state of Florida owns the larger portion of this in that greenways and trails that the state has. It's a statewide program.
Okay. Is the city considering running the South Tampa Greenways and Trails up that flagpole corridor to that parcel? Currently, it's actually running along the east side of South Manhattan Avenue.
That is correct. Yeah, currently it does run on Manhattan. From my understanding, this is property that is to be dedicated as park space, but to my understanding, the actual alignment of any future park, they don't know where that alignment, such as Gadsden Park over on McDill, has trails that zigzag through it. I believe that would be the same that would occur here.
Okay, and that's on the larger parcel. But we don't know yet what the intentions of the city are for the old railroad parcel.
Fair to say.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions? We'll move on to Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-04.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. I'm running a brief on 1904. It is located in the West Shore Planning District. It is at the northeast corner of Lois and Laurel. So this is Lois right here. It's south of Spruce. Spruce is to the north, and this is Laurel to the south. And it's kind of a neat L shape. Some of the surrounding items, the Carver City Lincoln Garden Civic Association, I have the yellow star. I have the blue star is the Tampa Solid Waste Department. So a lot of this is publicly owned, which you will see reflected on the next map. The Laura Ingram Community Center is over here with that green roof and an orange star. We have a multifamily apartment to the north of the subject site. It's kind of cut off of my aerial, but if I was to zoom out, these are some single family homes where my cursor is. So this is a privately initiated small-scale amendment at about 0.81 acres, and the request before you is to go from residential 10 to residential 35. We typically don't show an existing land use map, but I wanted to put it in here for the purposes of today, since the existing land use is important in this case. This blue is public, and that's reflecting all of that City of Tampa ownership, the Civic Association, the solid waste, all of that right here is blue under that City of Tampa. To the north, this brownish color is that multifamily that I pointed out on the aerial. Yellow indicates some of that single family in the area, and then the light gray is some of the vacant property. The adopted future land use map is a little bit simpler. We generally have regional mixed use 100 right to the north. It's a very intensive land use category that's throughout the West Shore area. The residential 10 to the south is, and that's also the adopted of the parcels, is that orange color. And the proposal would be to change this to residential 35, which is the dark brown. This would increase the dwelling units from 8 to 28. It would also increase the square feet from approximately 12,000 square feet to the potential of approximately 21,000 square feet. However, the subject site would still be required to meet locational criteria to utilize that square footage. So that would not go away with the approval of this request. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions.
Okay, any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Kress, do you have a question? No? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. We're going to move on to Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-05.
Again, Jay Collins, Planning Commission staff. We're going to move right next door to 1903. 1905 is also a transitional use 24 amendment in the South Tampa Planning District in Gandy, Sun Bay South. So if you remember where we were just a second ago, we were in the large wooded area here just to the west. We're now looking at the Clipper Bay or Clipper Cove apartment complex that is there. That is also in transitional use 24. This is also a publicly initiated amendment. What is interesting on this one is this is the first time that we have done this on privately owned property. So there's some interesting conversations that we'll be having, I'm sure, at the public hearing on this particular one. So again, you can see the single-family detached housing to the left, you can see the school to the north, and you can see the apartment complexes again to the east off of Lois. So again, this is publicly initiated. It's a regular scale amendment. It's just over 14 acres, transitional use 24 and residential 35 is what staff is asking for on this one. So again, you can see here the transitional use 24 to the south, and residential 35 directly to the east. So the other Clipper Cove, Clipper Bay apartment complexes have that residential 35 use that's there. You can also see further to the north some residential 20, some residential 10s, and then also if you move to the other side over to Manhattan again, you can see that residential 20 that is there. If the amendment were to be approved with the residential 35. So the intensities and densities, and this is one of the things that we want to talk about here. Existing potential of 344 units, or just over 900,000 square feet of non-residential uses. Those non-residential uses, again, can be industrial, they can be commercial. So the amendment, if approved, would remove from consideration the following zoning classifications. It would remove industrial general, commercial intensive, and commercial general. It would allow for an increase of residential uses there. Again, this is a plan amendment stage. The property owner would have to initiate any changes to their entitlements. And I'm available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Willman?
Thank you. So publicly initiated by City of Tampa?
This is publicly initiated through the Planning Commission staff based off of the Transitional Use 24 Land Use Viability Study.
Is this parcel, this last one you just presented on, is that owned by the city of Tampa as well?
No.
Okay. It's privately owned.
This is privately owned.
Is it related to the adjacent parcel, or?
No.
Just because they're both TU 24, they're public, it's a publicly initiated?
Yes.
They're both publicly initiated. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dix?
So just so I can understand, I mean, it's publicly initiated, but I was kind of hoping that I would hear today some comment as to what the owner of the property thought about this whole.
Yeah, yes, we've actually sent the owner of the property certified, thank you, certified mail. I have a bit of a cold that I'm going through right now. Certified mail to actually work with the property owner. So the property owner has received 2 certified mailings. We have not actually received word from them. All we have are the receipts that they have received those certified mailings. They will receive certified mailings at each time that we send something. So when the property notices go out, they will receive those. When the packets go out, they will receive those as certified mailings.
So I guess my question would be, I mean, because as I was looking at it, you know, that if currently they can allow up to 396 units on it, and under the proposed, it's not applicable, a maximum nor not defined. I mean, if the owner of the property objected to that, would you think the city of Tampa would continue? I mean, would that not give rise to one of those Bert Harris claims of a taking, or you know, diminution of the property use?
I am not a land use lawyer, so I won't be answering that. The idea of it, though, I believe one of the things you were saying is that the existing and the potential. The existing is 344 units.
Yeah.
That's the existing potential under the land use. They are not zoned for 344 units. They're actually zoned for a maximum of 288 units. This gets down into the zoning, which is something at the public hearing I'm sure we'll have a conversation about. They are not zoned at all for any non-residential uses. They're only zoned for residential uses here. So in that sense, it would not be a taking, since they are not actually zoned for anything other than residential units.
But Commissioner, we are very cognizant that this is a unique situation that we're trying here. The transitional use 24 land use category is a bit unwieldy, as it were, in that it allows for a lot of things that are no longer compatible with the existing development pattern that occurs in some of these areas. And that's why we've been asked by the city of Tampa to take a look at that and try and move as many properties as we can out of that category into something that better fits and would be compatible with the surrounding area. If we were to receive feedback from the property owner that they were not interested in this change, we would certainly not continue to move it forward. But that's why we're trying our best to get in touch with that property owner to make sure they're aware of it and understand that there's some benefits here in terms that they would get more potential for more residential units, but they would no longer be allowed to do industrial uses, for example, on the property. That's not the character of the surrounding area, but and that's part of why the city of Tampa is desirous of us moving towards making the land uses more compatible.
And forgive me, I mean, I do get it, I do understand it, and I respect what you're trying to accomplish, but it just seems like we're very much getting the cart before the horse. I mean, I can't, kind of surprised that it's gotten this far, and to have Mr. Collins say that we don't even have any contact with the owner, much less what does the owner think about it. So that just seems a bit strange to me. Okay, has there been other situations like that?
Certainly throughout the years, there have been times when we have done publicly initiated comprehensive plan amendments, going back to when the comp plan was first initiated.
Way back when.
Yeah, but but it's not something that happens on a regular basis. We've done a couple of times where we have initiated in conjunction with other amendments. We have recently in the city of Tampa been proactive about, there was a case, oh, Jay, you helped with it, so you probably remember, up in...
The one off of Tampa Street?
Yes,
just
that's
north of the river?
Right, where we got in contact with some other property owners and initiated a plan amendment so that the whole block moved in a similar fashion to another land use category. We also did that near
Brocado's over off of Columbus in that area.
We've done a couple of them over time. We always do our best to try and get in touch with the property owner.
So, okay, and then this is my last question. So would it be your intention that if because this is a briefing, and presumably following the briefing, next month or soon thereafter, it would come before us for a hearing of consistency, and would it be your intention to move forward and ask for some consideration from the Planning Council, even if we've never had contact with the owner?
I think we would make sure our legal counsel was comfortable with that.
Okay, I got it. Well, thank you.
Commissioner Marino?
Just a question on the property. Is this a affordable housing or low income housing?
Yes.
So it's not publicly owned, it's privately owned.
That's correct.
But there is sort of a public good being provided.
Yes.
Okay. And then, because I live in this neighborhood, the questions about sort of changing the land use out from underneath of the property owner, but if it's in sort of if it's in the tax rolls as low income housing or affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, I mean, does it matter if you're allowing the potential of future housing on what is already set aside for low income housing? I guess because I understand the comments of, well, the owner doesn't know what's going on. The owner is in Hollywood, Florida, apparently. But I guess my question would be is, going from existing to potential, any sort of decision we make still has to go before City Council. It's not as if our decision is going to add another 250 units or whatever to the property.
Correct.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to make sure I had that right, because if you just look on the property appraiser, there's just only one sort of small mention it's low income, but there are other Clipper Coves and there are other multifamily on that corridor that are considered to be low income or subsidized or affordable. So it does kind of match with that particular neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Powell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you said that you have not been able to get in touch with the owner, but given that it's affordable housing community, has anyone spoken to or reached out with like the on-site management company to see? I know that they don't have opinion in the say, but they're the ones collecting the rent for the owner, so I'm sure that they have a a direct number.
Right, and that's our same with the certified mailing. So we've been sending the certified mailings to the physical address here in Tampa, as well as to the ownership, as the commissioner rightfully said, which is in Hollywood, Florida. And again, what we have received on those certified mailings is just a receipt that someone has signed for it, but we have not actually received any contact back from them.
Because I echo some of my other Commissioner Dix's concerns where something happens, and especially given that this is low income housing, and I think that we would have an issue with property owner being upset, even if 2 mailings. I mean, they could be out of the country, and so it's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any additional questions? Thank you. We will move on to next item up is the Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-06.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Hay with your Planning Commission staff. I'm going to end the briefing with this last amendment. This is a text amendment. It's 1906. This amendment is publicly initiated by the City of Tampa staff. Currently, Under the Community Mixed Use 35 and the Community Commercial 35 future land use categories, projects proposing a vertical mixed-use structure containing two separate uses from two separate general use categories from the Land Development Code, meeting acreage requirements, and located along arterial roadways in the city of Tampa are eligible for consideration of a 1.5 floor area ratio by right. This proposed amendment would carry over that eligibility for consideration of the 1.5 floor area ratio by right for qualifying mixed-use developments to collector roadways just within the city's designated urban villages. You all are aware the urban villages are identified in the city's vision map. Urban villages within the city of Tampa includes areas such as Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, West and East Tampa. There's Hyde Park and Davis Island. At present, projects not located on an arterial roadway are limited to a 1.0 FAR by right for any development within that CMU 35 and CC 35 categories. With that option, everyone has the option to go to that 2.0 FAR if you meet the bonus requirements contained within the Land Development Code. Though the by right floor area ratio for certain vertical mixed-use development would increase under this proposal, no changes to the maximum floor area ratio of 2.0 are proposed under this amendment. That basically concludes my presentation. I believe there is someone in the audience that would like to speak if you're so inclined for public comment or.
Actually, since it's a briefing, we've decided we haven't been taking public comment during briefings. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Any questions for me?
Any questions? Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, I always appreciate your presentations because I know you carefully select the images that you put in there. And can I assume then that these types of buildings that you're showing would achieve that floor area?
This one is the one on Florida Avenue. That's currently under construction. I think it's almost done.
And it achieves that. It achieves a 2 or FAR.
They built that by right, I believe, under their Euclidean zoning, but they could utilize that bonus because of the mixed-use nature.
Right, and that's what I was getting at, particularly because this is targeting certain collector streets and village conditions. So my question had to do with that how is the 2.0 sort of set as the magic number or the max FAR, let's say?
Well, the city has always set that as the maximum. You can't go over the 2 in those 2 categories, even if you're in the bonus criteria. What has occurred in the past is there have been some mixed-use developments that have wanted to, they're located on collectors, but they could not use this incentive that was provided in the plan because it was limited just to arterials. Like, for instance, Cass or Willow, they're all collectors in urban villages. This is the plan's way through working in cooperation with the city to try to incentivize an improved form. It doesn't increase the development potential because that maximum remains at the 2, but it's the city trying to encourage a more mixed-use development pattern along these corridors. That's
okay. Let's hope that two is the magic number.
Well, remember there are the urban mixed-use 60, Right, which
yeah,
we do have that category. That allows a 2.75 by right and the option to go to a 3.25. So if someone was in an area that was seeking additional density, they could still go for another category increase to that UMU 60.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Kress?
Maybe I should know this, but is there a way to kind of marry the transportation and land use into this and somehow, as far as, I assume most of these corridors would have some level of transit service nearby. There's parking requirements, there's historic preservation, all those kinds of things.
Well, most of the mixed-use corridors, especially the arterials, are identified as mixed use, as transit emphasis corridors within the vision map.
Yeah.
A lot of the corridors do have transit on them, the collectors, not all of them. How the city currently looks at, I believe they only look at traffic counts when they're deciding what's a collector and what's an arterial. So there could be some opportunities to improve that and maybe allow for some additional incentives on those corridors with transit, but might be in the future. That would be a discussion with Kathy Coyle.
Okay, any other questions?
My last slide, I get to, we'll all be back. Jennifer, Jay, and I will be back with our staff recommendations to you at the May 13th public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to move on to item number 8, which is the compensation review for our executive director. Everybody should have received a couple items. The packet included, the electronic packet, included the annual evaluation index, which showed that last year, and correct me if I say something incorrect, last year Melissa received a 4%, so 2018, April 2018, a 4% raise. The year before, April 2017, she received a 4% raise. Her salary right now is, I've been told, around $156,000, her current salary. Other things that I found interesting looking through it and looking through a workers' comp civil service wage adjustment survey, the inflation roughly is 2%. I did ask her the breakdown for the staff last year. The remarkable category was a 4.25%. Two out of all of her staff received that. The commendable was 4%. I don't have the actual number that received that. Exceeds expectation was 3.5%, and the meets expectation was 3%, and then below expectations was a 0% raise. So basically, looking at her salary, I'll throw out the numbers just so we kind of have a good understanding. If she were to, if we rated her as the remarkable and gave her 4.25%, and we do not have to follow this too. We could go higher or we could go lower, but the 4.25% would be a $6,630 raise. If we gave her the 4% raise, which would fall in line with the commendable, that would be $6,240. The exceeds expectations, and I'm following the staff recommendation, would be a 3.5%. That's $5,460. The meets expectations, 3%, is $4,680. So like I said, we don't have to follow it. I just thought that was a good guideline to go with because that's what staff is expected to follow. So I'm going to open it up for comments, questions, and then hopefully at the end someone can make a motion and we can settle on, or we don't have to take any steps. You know, if at the end if we decided we didn't want to give her any kind of adjustment or raise, that's a possibility too. But would like any comments from any of you? Or questions or concerns, or someone like to make a motion?
Can you go back over, did you say the numbers of the different people who hit? You started with the exceptional.
Yeah, that's the only remarkable. There were 2 out of the staff that got the remarkable, and I do not have the breakdown for the others.
Does our director have the breakdown of the others?
I've actually found it.
Oh,
So
you found
as
it?
I've
Okay.
been digging, bonus to having non-paperless is I've got it all on my computer here. So I finally found it. We had 3 people remarkable, 20, so I had remembered that wrong when I told Commissioner Thrower 2. 20 commendable, 14 exceeds expectations, 3 meets expectations, and none that were below. And those are all of the classified employees. The unclassified have not been added into this count. I just also would say that the average rating of that I was evaluated at equates to a commendable on our rating scale, not a remarkable. So I just want to make that clear.
Exceeds is 3.5%. Meets is 3%. And I did want to mention last month we did the executive director rating worksheet that's in your packet. One correction I wanted to mention, we just noticed that the mean average on this sheet, it says 2.97%. It's actually a little bit over 4%. The way the formula was set up, I guess it calculated in a 0 for for the ex officio Dickerson. Yeah, so it actually, when you take out that, which you should in terms of dividing it, it goes up to over a 4 point, it's like a 4.1 mean. So I wanted to point that out. So that, if you want to, I thought that was helpful in terms of looking at it. There was a little bit of a spread, but it was, I mean, it was all, all good ratings. The means range from, looks like the lowest was 3.21 all the way up to a 4.79 was the highest. So, any other comments, questions? Someone like to make a motion?
I'm not going to make a motion. Well, maybe I would, but I wanted to start some discussion and just say, for the interest of discussion, I would consider splitting the difference between exceeds and commendable and go at 3.75.
Commissioner Willman?
I just wanted to clarify, I guess, the staff percentages in terms of the salary increase. The commendable, again, was what? How much percentage increase?
Oh, 4? It was 4%, yeah. Which,
and then the exceeds is 3.5.
3.5. And at the dollar-wise, it's 4 is a $6,240 raise. 3.5 would be $5,460.
And it is,
So.
would remarkable be considered a 5 in our observations when we provided the scores, where the mean you said is about a 4, it's a little over a 4?
For staff, the range for a remarkable starts at a 4.25 up to a 5. The commendable is a 3.61 to a 4.24. Exceeds expectations is a 3.35 to a 3.60.
Okay. Well, then I would, consistent with staff's salary increases, I would make a motion to have our executive director's staff be consistent with the commendable increase of the 4%, which would be consistent with the scoring that we provided at the prior meeting.
Okay. Are you making a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Second. We got a motion by Commissioner Willman, a second by Commissioner Joseph. Any further discussion before we vote?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure I understand. I don't think I have any argument at all, but I just want to make sure I understand. And I know we don't all want to take the time, but Melissa's doing a wonderful job, so we all agree on that. But the amount is at 4%, and that's commendable. That's that commendable number. Is that what I heard you say? Mm-hmm. And that's the same 4% for those employees that also attain that commendable number. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's the same percentage?
Yes.
Okay. That was my question. Just want to make sure that it was the same number. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No further questions? Oh, so we actually, Commissioner Willman made the motion. Who seconded it? Commissioner Joseph. Yep, I already forgot. So, okay. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Aye. Okay, so we have 7 in favor and 1 opposed. Commissioner Dowdy's opposed. Motion passes. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I really love serving as your executive director, so thank you very much for that. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this paperless up here. So I would definitely welcome feedback on how our reduced paper meeting, it's not truly paperless because there were a couple things we had to distribute to you all today. But if you have feedback or if you're ready to embrace this for future packets, we'd welcome that if you are not already one of our paperless subscribers. Sandy provided my report end of last week. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One, on May 13th, we will be having a workshop with the MPO TAC, as I said, at 2 o'clock. So we'll do that up front and then have your regular meeting starting either 3 or 3:30 based on the how long we think the agenda will be. There have been a couple of meetings that I wanted to highlight in the last month. We had one of our information barbecues, or brown bag quarterlies. It was a walking tour of the Pearl in Tampa Heights, and prior Planning Commissioner Bowen Arnold was kind enough to let us tour his new development up there, and that was really nice to get to see sort of behind the scenes of that. We had a workshop last week with the Board of County Commissioners on some concepts to move them forward in a comprehensive plan update. There is definitely consensus amongst the Board of County Commissioners that they want to make some changes in their comprehensive plan. I'm not sure we're quite at consensus on what the process to do that will be and what those changes are, but it was a really good conversation, and they are all very engaged on land use, transportation, the connections to jobs and affordable housing. And so we're excited to be working with them on moving that forward to some consensus and some good direction for how the plan should be updated. And let's see, also attached to the report, the executive director's report, was an update on the local government actions that had happened on plan amendments. And if you all like that format, one of the things Sandy and I talked about was doing this each month and maybe sending it out in advance each month so we don't embrace the paperless on this. Also, you should have received an invitation to a June 6th tour of Port Tampa Bay. And that's something that they are doing for all new board and committee members for both the Planning Commission and the MPO, as well as it also will be timed so that our future leaders in planning, high school students, will get to go on it as well. So would love for you to join us on that. There is an RSVP that's required so that they know how many are attending. And then the last thing that was attached to my report was a legislative update from Diane Sauls. And I wanted to mention that a number of the bills that are on there are transportation related, because she not only serves the Planning Commission, but she also serves the MPO and the River Board. And the MPO has taken specific positions on some pieces of legislation, things that relate to micromobility, which is like the scooters and things like that that are coming to downtown. And also some of there have been some bills related to MPO composition, as well as to surtaxes and how transportation surtaxes are utilized. So many times she will be advocating on behalf of our agency as a whole on an issue, but it may not be something that this board has taken a position on, just like it could be that the River Board took a position on something and she's advocating on their behalf. So I just wanted to make that clear why of late, it's been very transportation heavy, but I can remember years past when we were having growth management bill after growth management bill that we were dealing with on sort of the land use and comprehensive planning side. Oh, two other things that I just really quickly wanted to mention. We have been working with the Civil Service Department. That is something that there is legislation pending to do away with the Civil Service Board here for Hillsborough County. We are one of the agencies that had continued to utilize civil service because we didn't have our own HR department for a 50-person agency. We actually have utilizing some of the reorganization of our budget dollars, have created a position that will be bringing on a special projects coordinator who will do a number of things, but some of them will relate to HR for us to help fill some of the gap that is being created by civil service leaving. And she actually is a current employee of civil service, and so she knows a lot about those issues, but also will be able to help us with some of our strategic plan goals and other pieces in terms of internal communications and things like that that we could use to improve with employee engagement based on the climate survey that we did. And but we also are talking with counties. We'll be talking with county HR about how they can help fill some of the other gaps that will be created by civil service leaving. So that's something that we've been talking about. And then the last thing is that we have a contract to support the MPO outreach on the long-range transportation plan that I will be executing. It's right about $30,000 to support doing the MetroQuest and incorporating some greater outreach to communities of concern in some of our more underprivileged neighborhoods and outreach with that. And it's with the firm of Kittleson. So just wanted to give you an update on that too.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Melissa? Commissioner Dowdy and then Commissioner Dowdy?
Yeah, Melissa,
Yes.
to go to our legislative liaison services and stuff like that, is it possible, I belong to a number of different groups that have somebody that tracks bills and this sort of thing, and I've been getting like, I don't know, sometimes even more than monthly. Is it possible for her to give us a written report on, let's say, the bills that are being entertained, lobbied on, that affect the agencies that we're dealing with, and if it's the River Board, if it's the Planning Commission, or whatever, has asked her to, to do something, tell us what it is that we're doing, so we know.
Supporting it or not.
I mean,
Yes.
just.
Yes, absolutely. She actually provides that to Beth and I on a weekly basis. It's from a tracking software systems that she utilizes. She converts some of it into these more monthly reports, but happy to provide what she provides on a weekly basis. And also will send you the letter that the MPO took, in which they took those specific positions, so you can see the specific language of what they said.
It might spur some conversation and stuff like that. I've been getting weekly letters from one of them, and it's a lot, but it's still interesting information.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you talked about meeting with the county commissioners and updating the comp plan, is there any discussion, and maybe it's a part of that, about updating the community plans?
There was some discussion about that. There was definitely an acknowledgement that a number of them are out of date at this point. What we talked about were two things. One, that the goal was to arrive at something that updated the overall comprehensive plan first, but that might bring in many of the things that are in the existing community plans, because a lot of them had a lot of good ideas that then others built on and just should be countywide policy at this point. The other thing that Commissioner Merman brought this up, wanted there to be some sort of forum in our outreach where all the leaders of those community plans, if they're still around and engaged, could come together and sort of talk about how different ideas and things have worked, and how some of the new ideas that are coming from some of the studies that we've done are working with, are they in sync with their community plans or not? Because you can see some areas where it's matching, it'll match up, and then there are others where you can be like, oh no, this is like I-4. A lot of those community plans for Thanona Sassa talk about rural, maintaining a rural lifestyle. If we're looking at growth along I-4, that's an area where we're going to need to have a lot of discussion. So that was one of the things that she wanted to see as part of this process.
Yeah, and I was just curious if that was going to be coming up, because I've obviously read several of them and thought
Yeah.
those were pretty outdated from when they were written. I did not know how those go about getting updated, if that's, staff that has to initiate, or is that, public, or private, how do those, I don't know if there's already like a set way or when we have to update those every 5, 10, 15 years.
I think it was about in 2010 or 11, the Board of County Commissioners at that time gave us direction to update them every 10 years because they are envisioned to be more mid-range planning documents, with the comp plan being the longest range and zoning being the shortest. And they, 4 of the community plans were updated, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And then there were a number of countywide discussions about the future of community plans and a number of things. There was a guide for community planning that was produced by our office. It outlines a process that, whether it's a public applicant like us updating a community plan, or a privately initiated party, could, if they followed that process, be meeting the spirit of the community planning process in terms of notice and outreach and making sure people are involved. We haven't really had anybody from a private applicant side follow that. Update the community plan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melissa, I just had one comment about our legislative liaison on services she provides. This came up in the NPO meeting maybe a couple of months ago about bills that are being initiated, or that are moving through committee at the state level, let's say, that have the potential to benefit some communities while hurting others.
Yes.
And I think there was a letter sent to that effect to Tallahassee about that very issue. So I didn't know if she provides us with that type of information about pending bills or legislation.
She does,
as well.
and she works with the county and the cities, both Hillsborough and Tampa, the local level, but also the Association of Counties and League of Cities on issues to help identify that, because there's a lot of things that are going on quickly in Tallahassee, and often sometimes these things get added on to bills that weren't on your radar screen. And so that's part of what she's trying to look out for, is very regularly she sends Beth and I, is this something we should be concerned about, that type of an email, just to get our barometer on it. Yeah, sure. All right, thank you.
Next up is other business, unfinished business. I don't have anything. I did want to mention about encouraging my guys to get on the court tour on June 6th to go on that. It's a great tour, especially if you haven't been out there before. So it is a great opportunity to see the operation, to see all the facilities they have. Pretty amazing. So I'll go on to any. Thank you.
I was going to say, I hope they let us operate one of the container cranes. That would be.
Good luck with that. So, any new business? Any old business? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to make a comment about the green, not paperless. There was an edit to, I think, one of the items in the public hearing that was sent to us this morning. But if I'm not mistaken, the slideshow on the fees was different from what was in our packet. So I'm assuming the consultant did not provide the update.
No.
So
did not.
I don't know how fast things can be updated. I know from like our own company, it takes about 2 days to like change a sentence. So, but yeah, as much as possible when we have a presentation from from a consultant like that, that to update it as soon as possible, because I don't think it's ever been a staff issue. I think the only time I can remember something where you had to look at the monitor because it was so different from what was on here.
Yeah. Thank you for that feedback.
Okay. Any other new business? Any old business? Any committee reports? Okay. Commissioner Dowdy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll be very brief since I actually missed the River Board Technical Advisory Committee meeting last month, but I have a copy of the summary, and in conjunction with the normal options, there was a presentation on water goats. And I don't know if any of you're looking at me funny, like what the heck is that? Excuse me. Basically, simplest terms I can tell you, it's a trash collector. Okay, it's a floating trash collector, a net that would go at the end of a large discharge pipe or in that general vicinity or across the river in an area and catch the debris that gets washed into our rivers. And there are 2 in operation and a 3rd fixing to go in and around the city of Tampa. Mixed reviews. I mean, it's a maintenance cost, and there's a lot of trash, so it has to be emptied as far as that goes. But you got to think in conjunction with our oceans of plastic that are floating in places and that sort of thing, that it's a good idea. So that's my presentation.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to mention we do have a public hearing at 5:30. It's the Hillsborough County public hearing and City of Temple Terrace public hearing starting at 5:30. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Hi there. Yep. Just a quick update for the City of Tampa Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. While we continue to work with the city to finalize their annual update of the local housing assistance plan, I participated in an RFP review and scoring for owner-occupied renovations for folks here in the City of Tampa. So they had a contractor will take folks that have signed up with the city that need renovations to their homes, that the city pre-qualifies them, and this contractor will coordinate with local contractors to get that work done.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can, I would just mention that Sandy has emailed out the MPO report from that Commissioner Green would normally give, so we didn't have the paper sitting here.
Okay, thank you. Any other items before we adjourn? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.